Have you ever felt like your mind never truly slows down? Like even when the world grows quiet, something inside you keeps moving. A low vibration of thoughts behind your eyes. A restless current you can't shut off. You tell yourself to relax, to breathe, to be here, but the mind refuses to obey. It drifts through memories you didn't invite, conversations long over, futures that may never arrive. Silence doesn't calm it, silence amplifies it. You don't just think, you notice that you're thinking, and then you think about that too. You watch others move through life with a softness that feels unfamiliar. They laugh without hesitation. They speak without replaying their words afterward. They love without calculating the cost. And you wonder what it must feel like to exist without analyzing. Every emotion as it happens. For you, nothing is simple. Every smile carries a hidden meaning. Every goodbye feels like a chapter that demands interpretation. You feel deeply. You think endlessly. You care intensely. And that depth is both your gift and your burden. You weren't always this way. There was a time when feelings simply arrived and passed through you without needing explanation. You felt joy without dissecting it, sadness without naming it. But somewhere along the way, your mind learned to step in. Thinking became your shield, a carefully built structure of logic, memory, and observation designed to keep you safe. Psychology calls this hypervigilance, the brain's habit of staying alert long after the danger is gone. Maybe you learned it early that safety wasn't guaranteed, that peace could be interrupted at any moment. So you began scanning the world, searching for patterns, predicting storms before the clouds formed. But awareness has a cost. The more you analyze life, the more distant you feel from it. Emotions don't simply happen anymore, they're filtered, examined, categorized. Experiences are dissected instead of lived. You become both participant and observer, unable to fully surrender to the moment because you're too busy interpreting it. Neuroscience calls this analysis paralysis, the state where endless possibilities freeze action. You notice patterns everywhere, in people, in yourself, in the cycles of closeness and withdrawal. You see truths others overlook, the fragile threads holding relationships together, the quiet fear hidden behind laughter. And yet, the more you see, the harder it becomes to belong. You crave understanding, but it isolates you. You crave connection, but you overthink it until it dissolves. There's a thin line between awareness and obsession, and deep thinkers often walk it alone. You live in a world that rewards speed and certainty, but your mind is drawn to questions that have no clean answers. So you keep searching, through thoughts, through dreams, through sleepless nights. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because not knowing feels unbearable. But no one is born this way. Depth has roots, and those roots often grow in silence. It usually begins quietly. A child sitting on the floor of a dim room, focused on something small while raised voices echo behind a closed door. They don't understand the words, but they feel the tension. They sense the pauses, the shifts in tone, the emotional weight between sentences. Before they can name feelings, they learn to read them. And so they learn not to cry too loudly, not to ask for too much, not to take up space. They learn to watch. Maybe you remember that feeling, growing up in a home where love felt unpredictable, where affection arrived and disappeared like weather. Maybe no one meant to hurt you. Maybe the adults were simply overwhelmed, distracted, lost in their own pain. But you adapted. You noticed everything. You became observant, flexible, quiet. The one who could sense an argument before it started. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, the survival strategy of a child who learns that awareness equals safety. A developing brain stretches itself to track moods, anticipate reactions, detect danger in the smallest cues. This is where overthinking begins, not as intelligence, but as instinct. The mind becomes a radar, scanning constantly for shifts in emotional weather. You tell yourself you're just perceptive, that you're strong. But beneath it lies a need for control in a world that once felt unstable. You learn to read faces, to decode silences, to soothe others before soothing yourself. You become the peacemaker, the observer, the small philosopher trying to make sense of chaos through understanding. Attachment theory explains this clearly. When emotional security is inconsistent, the child's mind fills the gaps with meaning. You analyze tone. You interpret distance. Because your nervous system is trying to survive uncertainty. Slowly, you begin living more in your head than in your body. Feelings turn into puzzles. Emotions become information. Thinking becomes home. But this kind of depth comes with loneliness. While others play freely, you're already wondering why people hurt each other, why love fades, why trust breaks. You feel older than your years. Too aware, too alert. You carry emotions larger than you know how to express. So you hide them behind composure. The world mistakes your quiet for calm. But inside, your mind never stops asking questions. That child grows up, and the ability that once kept them safe becomes the very thing that sets them apart. At some point, you realize you can't stop analyzing. You wear your intellect effortlessly. People admire how deeply you understand things. They come to you for advice, for interpretation, for meaning. You are the one who can translate chaos into language, heartbreak into insight. But beneath that clarity is exhaustion, the fatigue of always understanding. You've learned to survive through thinking. It became your armor long before you realized it. Every observation sharpens your mind, but dulls your ability to feel freely. When someone hurts you, you don't explode. You explain. You trace their behavior back to fear, insecurity, history. You tell yourself you understand and therefore you shouldn't hurt. But you do. You just don't allow yourself to admit it. It's strange how emotional intelligence can become a shield. How empathy, once your strength, slowly turns into distance. You read people so well that you begin predicting rejection before it happens. You brace for loss before love has a chance to grow. It isn't bitterness. It's self-defense disguised as wisdom. The mask of insight protects you, but it also keeps you behind glass. Psychologists call this cognitive avoidance. By analyzing, you avoid vulnerability. By understanding, you sidestep the chaos of feeling. Neuroscience shows that overthinkers often rely heavily on reasoning centers in the brain, while emotional regulation struggles to keep pace. In simple terms, you think to survive but forget how to live. You believe understanding will bring peace, but peace never comes. Because understanding is not acceptance. You can analyze love perfectly and still feel alone. You can study happiness and never taste it. The labyrinth of thought keeps you safe from unpredictability, but it also locks you inside yourself. Sometimes you meet someone who almost reaches you. Someone who sees you instead of studying you. But even then, you hesitate. You search their words for hidden meanings, their silences for warning signs. You mistake vulnerability for danger because once it was. So you remain the observer, the philosopher, the mind behind the glass. Brilliant, articulate, and quietly alone. But even the sharpest minds eventually crave grounding. And science has tried to understand why deep thinkers experience the world so differently. Your mind isn't chaotic, it's active. Even in moments of rest, it hums with quiet electricity. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network, the system responsible for self-reflection, imagination, and meaning-making. For most people, it softens when nothing demands attention. For you, it keeps looping, revisiting, replaying, not by choice, but by design. You don't simply experience moments. You process them. You archive them. You search for what they meant long after they've passed. Research shows that introspective and highly sensitive minds often have stronger connections between areas of the brain responsible for memory, emotion, and imagination. Your thoughts aren't linear, they're woven. One idea branches into another. One feeling echoes through many. It can look like creativity, intuition, even brilliance. But it's also overstimulation. Your mind doesn't just observe the world, it absorbs it. Psychologists often link this to high openness to experience, a trait associated with curiosity, depth, and imagination. But openness means the doors of perception are wide open. Everything enters: joy, pain, beauty, grief, noise. You don't just witness life, you feel its weight pressing against your inner world. And then there's empathy, that double-edged gift. Some nervous systems are wired to mirror the emotions of others. You walk into a room and sense tension before a word is spoken. You notice discomfort hiding behind polite smiles. You absorb emotions that were never yours to carry. You can't turn it off. Your mind is tuned to human frequency, but that tuning comes at a cost. Your emotional bandwidth is constantly occupied. There's a background noise that never fades. Some studies suggest deep thinkers oscillate between analytical and empathic neural state systems that struggle to coexist. When one activates, the other resists. So you swing between logic and feeling, reason and sensitivity, control and compassion. It's an elegant chaos that only you experience. There is beauty in that complexity. It gives rise to art, philosophy, and insight. But there is danger too. Because the same depth that creates meaning can magnify pain, you begin to mistake thinking for control and rumination for clarity. The mind that sees what others miss can also trap you inside what it sees. There comes a moment when your mind turns against you. It doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in quietly, somewhere between reflection and obsession. What once felt like wisdom becomes weight. Thoughts stop serving you and start consuming you. You lie awake at night, body still, mind racing, replaying words you wish you'd never said, imagining futures that never happen, exploring possibilities with no end. It's a kind of insomnia that doesn't need darkness. It follows you into daylight. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves that grow stronger the more we avoid them. For deep thinkers, the shadow is often thought itself. The same brilliance that once brought clarity now tightens around the mind. Every idea opens another door. Every answer collapses into another question. You begin to wonder whether your intelligence is a gift or a trap. You find meaning everywhere but peace nowhere. The human brain was never designed to hold infinite awareness. Cognitive science suggests that constant activation of introspective networks can blur the line between creativity and suffering. You don't simply think about life, you interrogate it. You question love, suffering, fairness, existence itself. It's beautiful and unbearable. You feel detached from others because your mind lives several layers beneath the surface. Conversations feel shallow. Laughter feels temporary. Connection feels fragile. You envy those who live without needing to understand. For them, life simply is. For you, life must always mean. And in chasing meaning, you begin to lose touch with living. Philosophers warned that staring too long into the abyss invites it to stare back. Thought becomes both refuge and prison, sanctuary and cell. You see your reflection everywhere in passing words, in people's eyes, in sleepless hours. The mirror never stops reflecting, but it never offers rest. It isn't madness. It's sensitivity turned inward, awareness stretched too far. You can't stop thinking, not because you love knowledge, but because silence feels dangerous. Without thought, you might finally have to feel, and feeling once meant risk. Yet this struggle isn't born in isolation. It's shaped by the era you live in. A world that moves fast, speaks loudly, scrolls endlessly. A world addicted to stimulation. Everything is urgent. Everything is instant. And somehow, nothing feels real. Silence has become rare. Stillness feels rebellious. You pause to reflect and the world rushes past you. You search for meaning, but meaning takes time, and time is treated like a luxury. The digital age fragments attention. Notifications pull the mind in 1,000 directions. Even your thoughts compete with algorithms telling you who to be and what to want. The result isn't physical suffocation, but mental erosion. Psychologists call it cognitive overload, the burnout of a mind that's constantly stimulated but rarely nourished. Attention hasn't shortened because people are shallow. It's shortened because everything is loud. For deep thinkers, this fragmentation feels like exile. You see complexity, nuance, contradiction, but the culture wants certainty and speed. So you hide your depth. You soften your thoughts. You laugh at jokes that don't reach you. You edit yourself to appear normal in a world that mistakes numbness for maturity. But beneath that mask, something aches. You long for real conversation, real silence, real presence. And still you refuse to become hollow. Because to think deeply in this era is an act of resistance. To feel deeply is defiance. To slow down is rebellion. You are a quiet revolutionary, not fighting with noise, but with awareness. But even rebels grow tired. Because the cost of seeing deeply is feeling deeply. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from perception. Not from doing, but from noticing. From carrying meanings others overlook. You move through life with eyes that never stop observing. The tension in a cafe. The forced smile of a stranger. The friend who says I'm fine with a voice that trembles just slightly. You collect these moments. You carry them home. They echo in your mind like unfinished sentences. This is empathy fatigue. Prolonged sensitivity keeps the nervous system on alert. Stress hormones rise. The body prepares for emergencies that never fully arrive. You function. You smile. But inside, there's a constant bracing. Caring becomes heavy. Loving feels like lifting something too large. Rest feels distant. And yet this exhaustion doesn't come from emptiness. It comes from depth. It means your heart is still open, that you haven't numbed yourself into indifference, even when indifference would be easier. The inability to shut off the mind blurs wisdom and sorrow. You wonder if awareness is worth its cost, if knowing too much steals the ability to live freely. But something in you resists giving up your depth, because somewhere quietly, you sense that this weight carries meaning of its own. And within that weight lies transformation. Healing for deep thinkers doesn't come from thinking harder. You've already tried that. You've dissected every wound, analyzed every silence, explained every pain. But some things cannot be solved with understanding. Some things are meant to be felt, not fixed. Peace isn't the absence of thought. It's the ability to let thoughts pass without following them. The mind that never stops won't be silenced, but it can be softened. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reshape itself through practice, awareness, and compassion. The same circuits that once looped in fear can learn to rest. You begin to notice small things again, light shifting across a room, the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of something held in your hands. You start to inhabit your body instead of living only in your head. Psychologists call this embodiment anchoring, awareness where life actually happens. You learn to set boundaries around your inner world. You stop letting every thought take residence. You ask which thoughts nourish you and which ones starve you. Writing becomes release. Creativity becomes translation. Movement becomes grounding. And perhaps the most radical act of healing is connection. Speaking without over-explaining. Listening without preparing a response. Sharing silence without trying to fill it. When you live from depth rather than analysis, life stops being something to decode and becomes something to experience. You realize that being a deep thinker was never the problem. The problem was believing that depth required suffering. You were never too much, only to awaken a world afraid of stillness. And one day, after all the questions, the sleepless nights, the relentless searching, your mind grows quiet, not empty, not broken, just spacious. You see that your journey wasn't toward answers, but toward presence, that your thoughts were both guide and cage. And when they loosen their grip, you discover what was always there beneath the noise. Awareness, stillness, being. True intelligence isn't endless analysis. It's knowing when to rest in silence. And in that silence, you finally hear it, the quiet truth you were chasing all along. You were never meant to think your way to peace. You were only meant to remember that you already are it.